Everyone. This is Gail from Rainbow Food Rocks, Rainbow Healing Wellness, and Rainbow Herbals. Welcome back. I know it's been a really long time. I have a very special guest with me today. His name is Robert Michael, and he's with the House of Markus. That's Markus, not to be confused with the other spelling. And he is known for creating, operating, and defending private unincorporated organizations such as churches, integrated auxiliaries, private trusts, and membership associations. And today we are going to cover his upcoming private educational seminar, which will help people learn how to take back their rights, protect them from the private side of the law, and also help them set up private organizations. So without further ado, take it from here.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gail. It's a pleasure, and I really, really appreciate it. And this is just so timely, right? Because everybody is wondering what to do. How do I, well, first off, people are wondering how does it seem like, why don't I have rights? How did that happen? How can, these structures, these government structures, if you will, or whatever, how can they just run right over me and act like I don't have any rights? And the truth of the matter is you don't. You haven't. You never had. You only had privileges. So that's a deep rabbit hole, right? And people are usually blown away by that. But until we accept that truth to move into a new reality, we can't, because we're stuck trying to fix the old and broken, which will never be fixed. It's actually not even broken. It functions exactly the way it's supposed to. It's just that none of us were taught how it functions, why it functions that way, what its true purpose is. It's a big deception. It's a big lie. And anybody that's ever read the Bible will know about deception. And I'm not talking about the Bible from a religious standpoint. I'm talking about it from, just a pure perspective of what those books are actually saying, right? Everything's about deception. Everything's about the reversal. So I teach people, of course, how to connect with that, right? With their spirit and everything, and how to be grounded in real, it's kind of hard to say, but real law, if you will, which is not what you think, right? Everybody thinks, well, the law, the state says, the Fed says, the this, the that. Okay, that's a form of law, but that's not the law. And when you really understand what the law is, your whole entire perspective changes, because you realize, wow, the wool's been pulled over my eyes. I can't even hire an attorney, because that just means I'm giving my rights away when you really look at it. So what I did was, years and years ago, when I got involved with Waking Up in 2009, I started studying because I saw my parents losing their home through the bubble burst, of the mortgage industry and the housing industry. And it just wasn't right. My parents are hardworking parents. We all are, contractors for the most part. And they were losing their home. They were losing everything. And when they did the investigative forensics on their mortgage note, they found out that the bank had made, several $1 million on their home before the first 5 years that they were even in it. So when you look at that and you bring that into a court and you go, no, these guys have been paid. They've been paid, right? Why are they taking my home? And then you go deeper and you look at anybody that has a mortgage that's watching this, or a deed, go to your county and look your deed up. You're a tenant. You're not an owner. It says clearly on the deed, you're a tenant, joint tenant. So how do you own it? Deeds are everything in real property transfer. I mean, a deed is your title to the ownership, essentially. Yes, there's a title company, but the deed is super important. So when I started learning all this, I was like, whoa, there's a whole new world out there. And at first, it took me a while. It took me about a year of denial, of saying, no, none of that's true. I can't believe you, mom and dad. Why are you guys doing this? Like, you're fighting the system and all this stuff. And it took me about a year to realize they're right. And there's something really, really wrong here. But I'm not one to just take things off the internet. I have to really, really dive deep. So I spent years studying legal language, just the law dictionary. If you don't own a law dictionary, how can you know the language of the law? Because it's not the same language. That's why there's a dictionary. So if you learn, and I know you're a big fan of languages and you're very fluent in several languages, so you can understand that. I mean, you have to know how the words are defined in that language. So I started to research not only the legal dictionary, but years and years of history and, records from the National Archives. I mean, records such as like Federal Register, statutes and codes, statutes at large, foundational documents, historical documents, not just from the stuff we were taught in school, but what were other people at the time saying when all this started, when our country started to take shape? What were the arguments of the time? And it'll blow your mind. I mean, we are in the same thing now that we were then. It's no different. It's the same exact group of people running the same exact show, or I should say the same families, right? Running the same exact show, only now they're pretty much ready to shut it all down and collect on their alleged debt. And that's what all this is really about. So the rabbit hole goes really deep. There's a lot to know. But the one thing I've learned over this period of time is about the power of privacy, the power of being private. And right now there's a hot ticket item out there called PMAs. Everybody's turning into a PMA, a PMA, a PMA. It's really scary. It's scary because I'm very well versed in that structure. And I look and I'm like, oh man, people are going to get hurt. And they are starting to get hurt. They buy this couple documents from someone online, which I think are pretty shabby when I see them. Next thing you know, they're crying for help because the state's knocking on their door and they're filing a lawsuit against them. Right now, they turn around to the guy that they bought the paper from, and the guy's nowhere to be found, doesn't want to answer the phone. Okay, and some of you watching this might know who I'm talking about because there's quite a few people out there doing it that I have had to save some of their people, and I refuse to do it now because that's not. I don't have time for that. Like if you're set up properly and you're functioning properly, the next thing you have to learn is how to defend, right? Because if you're doing something with health these days, especially, they're going to come knocking at some point for the most part. I don't mean to say that to fearmonger. That's just the reality of the situation. So that's, and the private membership, if you will, which is a big hot ticket item, is only just a small portion of what people really need to know to be able to understand how to stand up for themselves. And it's not about fighting. It's not about fighting. If you're fighting for your rights, you already lost. And the reason is, if you look at history for 5,000 years, okay, that they are the people that run this earth, if you will, the thing that they're good with is war. Okay. And that's in the Bible, right? Satan, if you will. And I'm not talking about the religion. I'm just talking about the way that book frames everything, right? Or not that book. It's obviously a whole, collection of books, but war. And they're the largest war machine on earth, especially the United States. I mean, they're the largest war machine on earth. So if you're going to go fight for something, you better be ready because they're coming hard and they can wear you out like that. They'll run you out of money. They'll run you out of time. They'll run you just on stress alone, trying to fight something that you think is your right. When actually, if you really peel back the layers, you'll see you never had a right to it at all. And that's where we teach people, which I can't get into out in the public. What is that? How did that happen? When did it happen? And I can answer that question. It happened the minute you popped out of the womb, probably a few minutes later, but not too much further after that. And that's where it all started. Okay. And that's where it all starts, so the rabbit hole goes
birth certificate, correct?
Well, yeah, a lot of people say the birth certificate, but it's actually registering you at birth, right? So the certificate is just a certificate saying, yes, this child was born alive and registered its name and everything with us, right? So, but yes, essentially that's where the rabbit hole goes on that subject. So, it's really important today that people start to understand this and actually take action, which is why our seminar on August 20th and 21st is not a speaking seminar. We're not there to just speak to people. We're there to teach and to hopefully empower people to take steps. Because without that, we're just all talking about it. There's no action.
Let's give people some information too. So you're talking about in August. So specifically it's August 20th and August 21st. So it's a 2-day retreat, correct? And it's about 6 hours each day.
Yep.
You're going to have vendors there, and you're going to have a social event where people are dancing, and you're having a VIP dinner. Is that correct?
Yes. So we fellowship. It's actually the House of Marcus Fellowship is the full name of the organization. And
Okay.
we always have fellowship, right? Because that's what community is all about. So it's 6 hours of education. There's a VIP dinner for the first 40 people that choose the VIP dinner. And we're keeping it small because there's no way I'll be able to answer all that many questions at dinner. So we got to keep it small. But everyone's invited back for dancing, music at the end of the education starts at 7. The dancing starts at 7, music and dancing, live band, and to just get to know each other from around the country, from around Arizona, where the event is being held in Lakeside, Arizona. And it's really just a fun time. And then the second day is, again, 6 hours of teaching. There's no event after that, but, everybody can hang out and chat and get to know each other even on that day, during in between the teaching and afterwards. So it's a really important day. We do plan on having a few vendors. We'd like some more vendors. We don't have a lot signed up. We got Gail signed up, so you need to come out just to see Gail.
You're going to announce that.
Yeah, and we do need more vendors if anybody's interested. We're not going to fill the room with a ton of vendors. We don't have the space. We just want some of the people there that are there to promote their holistic organization, business, whatever it might be for them, or really anything that is helping people. And we hope that all of you, vendors and all, walk away with an understanding of, how do I make this private, non-profit, or I'm going to say no profit. Okay. And that's a big thing in people's mind, because everybody thinks, well, I got to have profit. Well, profit is your problem. That's the problem. Profit is what gets you into trouble. Nonprofit is a whole different ballgame. Now there's different avenues of nonprofit. Most people think nonprofit, they think 501c3, but that's not the only way to be no profit. And I say no profit because there is one way, well, there's a few, to be completely no profit and not have any filing requirements for, and again, this isn't tax advice or legal advice. You can look it up yourself. Okay. Churches, number one, a real church, not just a tax front, does not have to apply for 501c3 status and can still have all the benefits of a nonprofit. Okay. It can still give out receipts for people that donate. It still does not have to pay tax on the money as long as it's being used back into the organization and to pay people who are working for it, things like that, just like any other business. Okay, but under 26 United States Code, Title 26, okay, 508 C1A, it clearly says churches, the churches, its integrated auxiliaries, conventions, and associations of churches do not have to apply. They're accepted, EXCEPTED, accepted from applying for 501c3 status. Now, what does that say about all the churches out there who are running in and filing for 501c3 status? They've all sold their soul to Satan. They've sold their church and they don't even know it. And why do I say Satan? Because if you've ever studied, different ancient texts, the Nag Hammadi and different texts like the Book of Enoch and stuff, you will see that, the Satan, if you will, was the one who brought in to this planet the idea of money and war, okay, and vanity and all of these things. That was brought to this planet. For those of you that are, familiar with, the deep history of this planet, way back from Atlantis, they brought this problem, if you will, of money on purpose, because that's how you control everyone, right? So that to me says, well, that's the quote unquote devil. I mean, it's the dark, right? That's just the dark energy. I don't get into like a guy below that's red, and a guy upstairs with a beard. I don't get into any of that. But essentially, the Bible tells us all of this in fine detail about what to do, how to go about it. The problem is it's been taught in a way that is deceptive. So we don't really understand exactly what it's saying. All right. But we've picked it apart with some really good theologians and stuff like that, that can really read between the lines. So my point is 501c3 is for federal churches, because you've now registered that which is otherwise independent, unincorporated, and free into a system that now regulates it. So it's no longer free. Okay. And now there's a lot of red tape to jump through just to be tax exempt. But a church is under 508c1a is tax accepted. Okay. So the code applies to these other churches, except churches that aren't filing or applying. Now there's another section, 26 USC 6033. I think it's A3A1. Could be wrong on that, but if you look under 6033 and read down the paragraph, sub paragraphs, you'll see that churches, their integrated auxiliaries, associations, and conventions of churches are not required to file any tax information, or information returns, I believe is the verbiage. Okay. So not only is it accepted from applying for 501c3 status, it's also clear that they owe the government no returns, right? No information. So now that's one organization. I don't want to sell the farm and get into the other structures here, because again, I believe it all should remain in the private. But people do have a right to private assembly. Now, the problem that I see with these, what people are calling PMAs, one thing is that they're calling them PMAs. Okay, because you can try to search on the internet for like law about PMAs, and you're not going to find much. At least I haven't found much, because that's not really what they are. They're in the law, in the legal system, they're called unincorporated associations, what we call UAs for abbreviated, right? Unincorporated associations. So your Freemasons, your Knights of Columbus, your VFW, your college, what do you call it? Your sororities and your fraternities. Yes, they're all unincorporated associations. They are private member associations, right? Which is everybody's calling PMA. And what I see is, it's unfortunate, but a lot of people are like taking their business and trying to turn it into a PMA, which is really a bad move if you do it in the way that I've been seeing people do it, because they don't change the name, or they make the name of the PMA the name of the business. They're advertising out in the public, all that stuff. Do the Masons advertise out in the public? No, they have put commercials out, but if you watch the commercials they put out, it's very limited on what they tell you, right? They just draw you in to come be a member. All right. Same kind of thing. If you have a unincorporated association, you really have to understand how it's set up and how it should operate. And again, that's some things that we go over in the private seminar, but these are things that can really be powerful tools, and everything is coming back to the spirit. Now, in the legal system, from what I've studied for 14 years, and by the way, I haven't just studied it, like I have put myself in harm's way to test all of this and defend it. And yeah, I mean, it hurt sometimes. It hurt. Okay, I'll just tell you that. We'll just leave it there. But I have put myself in harm's way. I have gotten myself arrested in things to try out certain aspects, not just of the private organizations. I didn't get in any trouble for any of that. However, being involved with one, I did. Okay. And the reason that they did that was the reason I was roped up in it is because they were trying to shut it down, because it was so powerful and untouchable. So they had to frame a story to come after us, and that's what they did. Fortunately, I got everything dismissed. I beat it all on my own, and that's another story for another time. But again, they don't like these things because they're really powerful. Now, what I see out there is the new buzzword is PMA. And there's always a buzzword. There's always a lightning rod that they look for. What they do is they allow people to create so many of these before they come in and pounce and show, and then they make a spectacle out of it so that everybody else gets scared and shuts down, right? That's a typical Kabbalist type of plan. If you just look at history and look at these things over history that they've implemented many, many times. That's just what they do. And what I see are the people who are desperate to get their freedom and still do business and be connected to the system, even though they don't want to be in it. They don't really fully understand the concepts that they need to understand in order to back the state off immediately or the feds off immediately. They don't understand the law behind it. They don't understand why this thing has power. And then when I've read some of the articles of association, I was really like, oh man, this isn't good. Like, this isn't good, because they're not written well. You could tell they're copied from someone else off the internet, and they're copy. Someone grabbed a hold of it, started making money off it, and they're going around saying, oh, we're doing great things. But at the same time, it's like, are you really? Because if your people get in trouble and they come to you and you won't even answer the phone, how are you really doing great things? Like, what is really your intention? So
intention is definitely key as well with anything.
Absolutely. And, the House of Marcus Fellowship is actually an integrated auxiliary of the Unity of Divine Creation Ministry. It's not a PMA, although it is a private organization and it is a membership-based organization. The Unity of Divine Creation Ministry is the main organization. And then the UA is a separate organization that's supported by the church. That's what an integrated auxiliary is. So the House of Marcus membership is private. We don't put a lot out there. People come in. We have a very minimal monthly donation that we ask. And our thing is to constantly build. So the donations from the members go to build the organization, continually build it out, because we don't have startup capital. It's not like, you can't have an investor on things like this because it's not business. And that's one of the biggest things people have to start understanding. Stop doing commerce, because remember, what does the federal government have authority over? Commerce. And at the seminar, we'll get into the nitty-gritty about how they control every aspect of your life through commercial law completely. Now, a lot of people on the internet see some stuff like, oh, it's all law of the sea and admiralty. And I don't know if some of your listeners are familiar with that, but they might be.
They are. All these things that you're talking about, they should be familiar with. So go ahead.
Good. Because while there is some merit to that, it's not as cut and dry. And if you go trying to argue those points in any legal situation, you're going to get called a sovereign citizen, which is a very bad thing to be called, because in their book, a sovereign citizen is one that doesn't believe in any law, right? State or federal. They're tax evaders or protesters. They're cop killers. They are, angry anti-government people. We don't want to be called sovereigns. I don't use the word sovereign. God is sovereign. I'm an heir. That's how I see it, right? So, and in this country, we were never sovereign. People go, oh, we were sovereign. No, we were never sovereign. The collective body of people were sovereign. And if you read law the right way from those who constructed it here, it has been said over and over and over in numerous court cases throughout history. The body of people are the sovereignty, not each individual. While each individual retains rights of that sovereign body, each individual is not sovereign. Okay, in this country, in the law structure, it's the body of people together that is sovereign. Okay, so again, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And yes, it's true that it's based on the law of the sea, but you can't argue that point so directly in a legal matter, because they'll laugh you right out of there. First thing they'll do is say you need a psych eval. They'll call you crazy. Then you're stuck with that. Now you got to try to overcome a psych eval, which usually is a setup, because whoever's doing the test is usually on the side of the court and they wind up calling you crazy anyway, just to do it. And I say this because I've been through these things so many times myself, my family, my friends. We've all put the rubber to the road over 14 years. So everything I'm talking about is from hands-on, in the muck and mire experience, and not just reading stuff online. This is all very much firsthand knowledge. So,
in other words, you put everything to the test. I have a question for you. What law books do you use specifically if somebody wanted to start educating himself or herself?
Yeah. So a lot of people ask me that. And of course, it's like, oh boy, where do we start the list? I remember somebody asked me on Instagram, and I had a list of about 50 books just to start. Right? I was like, well, you can start there, So yeah, it's very hard to pinpoint, but law dictionary, get yourself a legal dictionary. Now, the older legal dictionaries are better to reference sometimes, like Black's Law Fourth is a big popular one in the freedom community, but most people don't know why, but the reason is because it's before they started to pull out a lot of the common law references. Okay, there's a lot of references to the common law still in Black's Fourth, I think, which was 1948 or 58. And then they started to pull out references. So anything beyond that is still good. And actually, I've got all 8 volumes. I think they're up to 10 or 11 now, but I've got 8 volumes of Black's Law. But why do I say the legal dictionary? Because I've learned more about law by understanding what the word actually means. For instance, people talk about status. Well, what is status? You know what I learned from looking up the definition of status, which wasn't in Black's Law Fourth, by the way. It was in the 7th edition, and it's not in the 4th, 5th, or 6th, or 8th, or any other edition. And I was like, whoa, I learned something so huge, even after all these years. This was just a few years ago. The law of status. And what it says is one of 3 departments of civil law. Okay. And then it references the other 2 departments. So there's law of status, law of property, and law of obligation, which is contract. And that was so huge because in 1938, they merged equity and at-law jurisdiction into one form of action. And that's Rule 2, Federal Rule Civil Procedure. And it's in every civil procedure rule in every state. One form of action, the civil action. So while, yes, common law exists somewhere in the muck and mire, equity law exists, all these other law forms exist, they come under the civil law umbrella. And in civil law, so you don't get lost in the muck and mire, think about it this way. There's only 3 things that all of the statutes and codes can pertain to. Only 3: status, property, and obligation. Okay, that's huge. That was such a huge eye-opener for me. So I tell people law dictionary. Some of the other resources, I make sure I use reputable, recognized resources. Cornell Law. I'm on Cornell Law constantly, right? Can't deny Cornell Law School, Justia. I use a paid membership to a site called Casetext, which is a court case site that I pay yearly, and I can access any court case out of any time in any jurisdiction in this country. They're all there. It's a great search engine. I love it. But you do pay for it. Law encyclopedias. So think about growing up in school. We had dictionaries, we had encyclopedias. Same thing in law. You have a dictionary, you have encyclopedias. And in this country, there's particularly 2: American Jurisprudence and Corpus Juris Secundum. Okay, those are the 2 law encyclopedias. Now, mind you, I don't even know what they're up to now. I know years ago they were like 20 grand for the whole volume, just like, some other law or some other encyclopedias, right? Same thing. It's extremely expensive. I was fortunate enough, somebody gifted me a 1996 version. But again, if you look at the newer versions, there's little things taken out, over time. So that's why I love Rage Against the Machine when they said they don't have to burn the books, they just remove them. Because that's all they do, right? So
isn't that so interesting?
Yes. So yeah, those are some places that I go for research. But any historical books that you can read that, in my opinion, don't come with the slant of the typical narrative. In other words, if you're reading a book about the Civil War and it's talking all about the Civil War, get rid of it. Or sorry, it's talking all about slavery, get rid of it. Okay, the Civil War was not about slavery. It had nothing to do with slavery. It had to do with states' rights. Hello, Roe versus Wade. Okay, states' rights. That's what it had to do with. And actually, it was after the Civil War that they paved the road for Roe versus Wade to happen in the 70s, 100 years later. Okay, actually almost 100 years from the 14th Amendment being passed. Okay, the 14th Amendment came out of the Civil War and created two forms of citizenship. Well, I'm sorry, it created another citizenship called United States citizenship. That's why anybody that's listening to this, go right to Cornell Law or go to the government website, read the 14th Amendment. It says anyone born or naturalized in the United States is a citizen of the United States, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is a citizen of the United States and a citizen of the state wherein they reside. So before the Civil War, before the 14th Amendment, you were known as a national or an Alabaman, a New Yorker, things like that. And you can verify this still by looking at the Government Printing Office Style Manual, GPO, Section 5.23, Chapter 5, Section 5.23. Now, what the GPO Style Manual is, it dictates the style of writing for all the statutes and law. Like, so when the legislature and all finalize law, it has to fit the GPO Style Manual. And anything else they write, really, pamphlets and all that have to fit style manual. And Section 5, Chapter 5, and Section 5.23 says nationalities. Okay. Now, nationality is a nation, right? You can't have a nationality without coming from a nation. Underneath nationalities, the entire way down is 50 states. Alaskan, Alabaman, Arizonan, and the list goes on. So they're telling you that your state is a nationality. But what they did with the 14th Amendment is they created a federal citizenship that now means if you're a U.S. citizen, you reside in Washington, D.C., the military bases, the territories, anything that Washington owns, because Washington doesn't own the states. It doesn't have any authority to tell the states what to do. But the 14th Amendment helped change all that. It was part of it. It was one piece of the puzzle, a big piece. Because once the federal government had its own citizens, now all they had to do was trick everybody to become one. Because why did they create a federal citizenship? You'll read literature and government literature especially, and legislation prior to the 14th Amendment that says U.S. citizen or citizen of the United States. The difference is back then it meant a state, citizen that was part of the United States of America. Okay. But once the 14th Amendment came in and defined what a United States citizen is, it changed. Because prior to that, it was just average speak, so to say, right? It was just defined by the average person, as it wasn't defined anywhere by the government. So what they did was they said, look, the slaves are free. There's no way for them to vote. They're not state citizens. So in order to make them state citizens, we're going to make them federal citizens first. So we can come in, the federal government can come in and tell the states, oh, no. They're a citizen because we said so now that they're one of ours. And because they're one of ours, they have a right to one of your states too. Okay, that's why they wrote the 14th Amendment. And that's why they brought slavery into the Civil War, that the argument of slavery. There were arguments leading up to the Civil War about slavery, and there were also arguments during it, but that wasn't the main point of the war. That wasn't why the South walked out. And that's a big misunderstanding. And I'll show you where the evidence to that is. They didn't free the slaves. Lincoln didn't free the slaves to be a nice guy because he believed in, actually, you want to know what Lincoln's real plan was? Read a book called The Real Lincoln. Okay. It's great. It's by an economist out of the University of Maryland. I forget his name, but it's called The Real Lincoln. Lincoln's plan was, well, yeah, we can free them, but we're going to need to take them all, put them on a boat and send them to Haiti. Because most of the slaves were Haitian. They weren't African. They were Haitian. So we're going to send them back to Haiti. That was his plan. Now, I want everybody to think about this. Slavery was abolished everywhere in the world without a war. Why did it need to be a war here in the land of the free, right? Why? Where brothers killed brothers, families killed families, because it wasn't about that. The South said, hey, North was like, you guys are making too much money. We want a piece of that. We want to tax you along. And they said, no, you're not going to come in and do that. We have a right to secede this union. It is a right for us to back out. We're done. We're out of here. Okay. And the North said, oh, no, you're not going to do that. So Lincoln, whoever was, pulling his strings, they sent a ship down to Fort Sumter and fired on them. Right. And that they started the war. Lincoln sent military troops down to the South and put a gun to their head, to the head of the legislature and the Congress and the Senate, and said, you guys get back up here. That's a dictatorship. The Constitution doesn't give the president that kind of authority. He can't do it. This government that people think they're going to fix has been destroyed a long time ago, and it's never been the same, and it will never be the same. So what happened was then they went into the war, right? So the North was losing, the South was kicking their butt until Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation. Just read it. It says right in the second paragraph, okay, as a fit and necessary war measure, slaves are freed in the northern occupied territories of the South. Listen to that. As a fit and necessary war measure, not, hey, let's free the slaves because they deserve to be free. No, we need to win this war. So if we set them free on the plantations down there, the Southern boys are going to run home because they're afraid that their slaves are going to uprise and kill their wives and their children who are defenseless back on the plantations. And that's exactly what happened. Right after the Emancipation Proclamation, and they don't tell you any of this, right? These guys started heading back and going AWOL to protect their families, and they started losing. And that's it. That's how they lost the war. So we've had a dictatorship ever since. And that's when the first executive orders started to come in, 001, I believe it was, or sorry, 0100. Okay. Lincoln took extraordinary military powers that the president didn't have and still doesn't have to this day. And anytime the president does that, the Constitution is on standby, doesn't apply in times of war and emergency. And if you want, man, I don't have it in front of me. I should have pulled it up. If you want a Senate report on that, okay, from 1973, 100 years later, there's a Senate report from 1973. You could even Google it, Senate report 1973, emergency powers, and I bet you it'll come up. And what they're saying in there is most people, if not all, and their grandparents have lived under emergency rule their entire lives and have never known it. But they only go back to 1933 because we're still in an emergency from 1933. We're not out of that emergency yet, which is the banking emergency, which is why everything's happening, because it's all banking, because we're in emergency. We've always been in emergency. Mm-hmm. And then
a lot of my viewers are familiar with that too from the we've talked about that. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, and then they reinstitute the emergency, right, with COVID and things like that. I'll give you an example. I was in court recently, and the state had to bring the issue to trial within 180 days. That's technically right to speedy trial, right? In their statute, it says 180 days, which statutory is just public policy. And a lot of you guys know that. But anyway, when you're in court, they play that game where, oh, don't think you have any rights because you don't. And for those that, there's a lot of people that watch and hear my stories and, well, you should have done this, you should have done that. Trust me, there is not a trick out there that you've learned in the past 10 years that I haven't seen or done or implemented. Okay. And I did. I implemented all the stuff that I have definitely wiped cases out with before. Okay. But there are states and counties and egos that don't care, right? Which is fine. I'm good at this. We're good, right? That's what I'm saying. I'm good at this. We got this. So I go in, and of course, one of the first things I do is I enter the court, not specially. A lot of people say you want to enter in a special appearance. I entered under restricted appearance, okay, under the rules of admiralty. And because I'm being threatened, like I can't not show up for court or you guys will arrest me. Like I don't have a choice. You got guns. So I show up and I motion the court, which clearly said in my motion, this motion does not confer any jurisdiction. I am challenging the jurisdiction and moving this court to discharge under its own rule of 180 days. If not brought to trial, you have to discharge. It was like 300 days later that they were bringing this thing to trial. And the judge said, well, because of COVID, that doesn't apply now. And I said, great. So I have you on the record saying because there's an emergency, you can use an administrative public policy rule that overrides my right to a speedy trial. And that's impossible because it's been stated in many court cases. It's axiomatic that you cannot supersede a statute cannot supersede the Constitution. It can't be repugnant to it and it can't supersede it, right? So what's that tell you? The truth of the matter is when they announce an emergency, they throw that out the door. So you don't have a right to that, which in my journey, a lot of people have don't go into court. You can do this, you can do that. And there's a lot of stuff you can do. There's a lot of great guys out there with a lot of good knowledge. And yes, there's a lot of little tricks to the trade to get rid of a court case. Okay. There's bonds, there's UCC, there's all kinds of stuff. But I will tell you from my 14 years of experience, they're not solutions. They are Band-Aids for the symptom, but they're not solutions for the disease. Okay. So while they may be, I don't teach any of that stuff, by the way. I don't get into any of it. Have I? Of course. I've watched many of my friends suffer thinking, oh, I got my UCCs all done. I'm a secured party creditor. I've got my, my bonds. I'm good. And they're like, nope, sorry, jail. Like it happens. So for me, I was like, well, that doesn't suss out to me. But then I've seen people who actually have done really good things with it, right? And it has worked. And what I started to notice over all my years is that the people on the other side here, the judges, the prosecutors, all these people that we think they all know, they don't all know. They absolutely do not all know. Some of them know a little tiny bit. Some of them know a little more. Some of them know a lot. And some of them know absolutely nothing. And I've witnessed it with my own eyes on all that whole spectrum, because we've actually talked to retired judges. So we know what some of them know. And you can tell by the way a judge responds or acts that they don't really know. Okay. Because if they don't get nervous about a certain thing, they don't really know. And if they do get nervous, they know something, and they probably know that you know more than them. And that's what makes them nervous. But they may not know all this private law, bonds, birth certificate stuff that people are doing. So for me, I was like, okay, I got to learn both sides. I got to learn the public side and the private side, because how can you know what the opponent's going to do if you don't know what they know? The great thing about that is when you know the private side stuff, they got no clue which way you're coming in, right? Like it's war. I mean, court is virtual war, which is why we don't aspire to go or, want to go to court. However, I have gone into court, and I have got myself into situations just so I could experiment and see what they're doing on the back end, So again, I put myself in harm's way just to solidify what I teach and what I do. And, a lot of that we'll talk about at the seminar. So the rabbit hole. For you. Go ahead.
So I have a question for you. So a lot of people are talking about American State National, and then heard it connected to the 14th Amendment in certain conversations in certain groups. And so what can you tell us about that? Is there any kind of knowledge that you can share about that?
Absolutely. Just what I just said, it mainly, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay. I've seen people that have had it and amazing things have happened, right? Where they have declared their American national. I do that too. Like everything I declare, I'm an American, period. I know I'm not a U.S. citizen. I've got records to show that, recorded at the county. It's all, I'm all done with that. But that doesn't mean they're going to accept it all the time, no matter who you notice, right? So from what I understand about a lot of people doing American National stuff, they're declaring in affidavits and then they're giving notice. And that's great. A lot of times you get somewhere with that, but a lot of times you don't. So to me, I look at it and I go, wow, that's a great tool, but it's not a solution. It's still not a solution. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that's not what House of Marcus does, for a good reason, right? Because we don't want to keep whacking off the branches, you know. Is it good knowledge? Yeah, it all applies. And everything I've seen, mostly correct. I do see a lot of misinformation flying around about, and I don't like to argue. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm really good at it, but but I don't like to waste time arguing with people just so I can prove I'm right. If I'm going to argue something, it's going to be, you know, to help everybody else, right? It's going to be with a system administrator who thinks they're correct in taking my rights away. That's about it. But I don't get into social media arguments with people. I just go, oh, yep, you're right. And not a problem.
Two more questions. Okay, so pretty much beforehand, when you were going over everything with Lincoln and so on, and we were talking about the state national versus becoming a U.S. citizen, so that would be what people are going back to if we had to think about it and try to help people understand. It's going back to before that whole scenario. Is that correct?
Yes, that's an accurate assessment. Yep.
Okay, and then I have lost my thought. I had one more question. And then what I wanted to say is, so then I think you would probably agree that the best way to go about doing things is to start creating these trusts. Is that correct or no?
Well, no, you don't have to be an American. You don't have to have like American national title to have a trust. Not at all. The elite all use trusts and they're all U.S. citizens, and that's why they can't be touched. Trusts are very powerful if you know the ins and outs of it.
So that's my question is
oh yeah, you don't have to be
national route. In your opinion, do you think that it, you know, you can do that, that's fine and dandy, but it might actually be better to go with creating these UAs and trusts, or you could have both going on at the same time? Is that
yes
what you would say if someone were curious?
Oh yeah, totally. That's an accurate assessment as well. I mean, they're tools and how you use them is up to you. That's why we don't tell people what to do. We just say, here's your tools, you use them. Now, I combine all of that. So like you were just saying, like, is it good for somebody to do? Yeah, I do it all. So that's, you know, my whole thing that I do is loaded. Like it's, you know, good luck stepping across it. But you can see that from the situation I put myself in last year, which I was just talking about with the judge and the 180 days that they violated and all that, that they still will run over it. But that for me is a great thing because now I've got a claim, right? I've got it because the whole time, and this is what I mean about learning how to defend these things. Okay. You have to really understand you don't have a glorified piece of paper that's just going to turn the police away, the IRS, whoever, you know, CPS. You don't, no, the paper doesn't do anything. You do it, whether you have the paper or not. And I've got plenty of witnesses that'll attest to the fact that they didn't have any paper. And just the way that they conducted themselves, bam, they left them alone.
In other words, it's the knowledge that is needed. So you can have one set of documentation or another set of documentation, but you need to know how to explain it and present it. And that's what you're offering in the membership and in the event. Is that correct?
Right. Yes. Not so much how to explain your documentation, which is very important. Yes, I agree with that. Okay. But how you don't even need to if you understand how to conduct yourself in every situation. And there's some real basic stuff that'll blow your mind that you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. Yeah, that's all you need to do. And when I've helped some of these PMAs, it was a simple letter and I didn't bring up anything about state national. I didn't bring up anything about my 14th Amendment, that nothing, no records, no, just simple letter right back to them. Not only did the state, this one particular case, not only did they back off of this private association, they also, there was another issue that I didn't even respond to. I didn't even know it was happening. They called me later and said, guess what? The other issue sent us a letter and basically told us they're not bothering us either. So it went through the grapevine. Oh, can't touch them. Just by the way that we responded to their initial contact. So, and I will say,
response is key.
Your very first response is absolutely key. Your whole entire case, if you will, for lack of a better word, on that situation is hinged on that very first response. Yeah.
Would some of those responses happen to involve knowing contracts by chance? Just curious.
It's good to know, yes. Well, you should know contract law, yes, because it's all contract law. And contracts have to be consented to.
Okay.
Right? And that's why people go, I didn't consent. No, you didn't, but you did. Because all you got to do is answer to your name and you've consented. That's it. It's that simple. That's why when people call me randomly or something, you know, I'm like, hello, you know, and they ask, you know, Robert, no, who's calling? Who are you looking for? First thing I say, who's calling? And when they say who they are, I'm sorry, there's nobody here by that name. Click. But if you notice now, people don't, you know, they just call and they ask your name, right? You start talking.
Yes.
Don't do it. Train yourself. Start training yourself. When somebody calls my name, I don't answer unless I absolutely know who it is. I had a guy in a bar one time.
All my phone calls, actually. I won't answer the phone. They have to leave a message. And then even then, I play like, okay, who is this? And I'm not going to give, you know, even when I call back.
Right.
I'm very, very careful about that.
I had a guy in Florida come up to me. I'm sitting at a restaurant. I'm at the bar ordering dinner. And he sits down next to me. He looks at me, he goes, Robert Michael. And I go, I'm sorry, who? And he's like, oh man, I thought you were somebody else, man. Somebody I saw on the internet. And I was like, not me, man. Kept eating, you know? I'm like, oh, this is awkward. And then he's like, man, you sound like him too. And he kept saying this stuff. I said, no, man, but I said, by the way, what's your name? And he told me his name and I recognized him from Facebook because I used to be on Facebook. This was a few years ago. And then I was like, oh, I know who you are because we've had exchanges before. It just happened to wind up in this restaurant.
Small world.
Yeah.
World.
So it was okay to open up at that point. But, you know, I was holding my ground until I picked around and kind of found out who it was, you know. But yeah, it is. It's a small world and you never know who's going to call your name. So, and the name is the key to everything, really. Mm-hmm. If you really get down to brass tacks, it's the key to everything. So. Yeah.
Yeah, note for a second, just one moment.
So I just want to say too, that what we're doing at the seminar is teaching very practical ways to protect yourself. Okay. And, you know, giving people action items to do. We're not just up there speaking. It's not a speaking event. It's an educational event. You're learning something. You're coming to learn and hopefully be a part of our community, because in our community, in our membership at the House of Marcus, we have a community forum that is packed with people on there, all the members just teaching each other all these different aspects of laws, you know, going over what they've seen, what's worked, what's not worked, all this stuff. And there's no arguing. And we have over, I forget, like we just opened the UA in December, and we've probably got, 50 or 60,000 chats on there, and no one has argued. We have one incident one time where we had to kind of come in and be like, look, if you guys don't chill out, you're out of the membership. We don't do that. The membership says we're brothers and sisters. We're here to help each other. We're not here to argue about who knows more about law. That's not the point. And that was it. It was that one time. So it's a great asset just to be a part of the community every month, to have that, that support. So what we really want to promote is community, privacy, mutual support from each other, and how we build something much bigger that is not in the jurisdiction of government commerce. And that means it's protected.
And that's why I'm bringing you on here, actually, because most of my viewers also know that my bigger vision is to have almost like a holistic healing center and educational center in one. And correct me if I'm wrong or mistaken, but I believe that your bigger vision is somewhere along those lines as well. Is that correct or no?
Yeah. So, we can't heal and, we can't teach, right? Because that's all legal stuff. However, we can enrich, we can enlighten, but yes, that's ultimately.
So in other words, use different words to describe. No.
I heard a guy say back in 2010, when I was really deep into learning, new at learning all this, really deep. And one of the things he said is the most powerful thing in law is the white on the page. What's not written in a statute is very hard for them to argue. And I could tell you most of the things I beat have been that way. So yeah.
So in your opinion, would it be best to just call these things enrichment programs?
Well, again, without selling the farm, I would call them whatever you can find that's not in the statute. So you're going to have to do it.
So I'd have to check the statutes. Okay.
Yeah. I'm asking in my opinion, because I can't tell anybody what to do, but we're on the right track.
In your opinion. I'm trying to get that down pat. I'm trying.
Got it. So yeah, when we met, that was the thing. It was like when we met, we were like, whoa, you know, we've got this, like your knowledge and health and what you've done and how intricate you've been with recording it all is the same thing I do in the law. We have this, you know, this parallel thing that's just like, oh yeah, this works. And by the way, you know, House of Marcus isn't just me. Like we have a team of volunteers that work day and night, a support team. We have support ticket center where you can send in support tickets, ask questions, things like we have people on it nonstop. So we are growing an organization. It's not just, you know, me and my membership. It's really not me at all if you think about it. Because when I'm gone, it's still going to go. So it's not me.
And what you're creating is based on trusts, correct?
It involves trusts, not necessarily based on it. Everything I build is based on divinity. Everything I build is based on divinity. The Roman civil system was built and then turned into the Vatican. Okay. And then the Vatican took it and made it the church system. Okay. And then they went around and they, of course, made all the kings and queens scared to death of them because they weren't going to go to heaven. So you had to go through, you know, there shall be no salvation except through the church. Okay. So you got to look at history, what they did from Rome into the medieval times, because that's where a lot of the keys are. Okay. So they went from polytheism to monotheism overnight with Constantine. Constantine all of a sudden stepped out, became a Christian after they had the Nicene Council. Many people realize that at the Nicene Council, they pulled a bunch of stuff out of the Bible, you know, and a bunch of books, and then they put together the narrative that they wanted, right? So that people couldn't figure it out. And then they said, oh, there's only one God. Oh, and there's a guy named Jesus, and he's the only one that can do this. No one else, which was a big lie, right? Because if you're disempowered from the beginning, you're never going to know that the man was just teaching to be like him because you have the same powers. Ye shall do greater things than I. I mean, it's right in your face in the book, you know. So that has a ton to do with our law system today, a ton. So we base everything off of biblical. Well, I shouldn't say we base everything off biblical. Our law starts with divinity, okay? Even our documentation, because that's where the crown comes from, right? The crown is your connection to divinity. That's why we are crowned. That's why you see behind me, the seal that was given to me in my visions of, yes, this is the seal you're going to create. Okay, great. Because in that law system, they recognize certain symbols. We all know there's a lot of symbolism. Okay. Mm-hmm. I was trying to come up with a seal for one of our organizations, which, by the way, that's a seal for what's called the Shem Society. That's a different, you know, that'll house the House of Marcus and other UAs and stuff like that. But the Shem Society is the society. And for months and months, I tried at it to use my brain, right? That didn't work. All of a sudden, I had some very, you know, interesting downloads. And I woke up and I was like, okay, this is it. You know, this is it. I have to speak to them in the symbols that they recognize. And it comes out of the Bible because they've built the entire Babylonian system, the Roman system and everything. They built it all off the Bible. Our modern Babylonian system is all built on the Bible. So when we speak to them in those terms, they know it. See? So that's why you'll see Bible quotes all over our stuff and all. Okay, it's not that we're like hardcore Christians, got to go to church, and we don't believe in dogma, we don't believe in religion, and we don't believe in proselytizing. We believe that the Bible is how they built the system. So you can't fit a square peg in a round hole. A lot of these guys doing American national stuff and all, they go way overboard. They start trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, or a round peg in a square hole, right? System doesn't compute that. It doesn't compute private rights. It doesn't compute private side stuff. It doesn't. It only computes public side stuff. So it's not so much a lot of times that we're being railroaded consciously. These people just have no clue what to do with it. They're like, our system can't handle that. So when we go back to the Bible, that's our way of going to the root and saying, we're talking to you from God, and the God that y'all are aware of, right? There's two gods that they use, right? Baal, Satan, all that. That's their God that they don't even know they're worshiping. And then there's the one supreme creator that is consciousness, okay, which is our God. But the great part about it is the Bible is so deceptive. We can go, but aren't you talking about the one supreme creator? Uh-oh, the emperor has no clothes. Now they're busted, right? What do we do? We can't let them know we worship Satan. Like, we have to go with this. And if you look at the Pope's seal, okay, it says, you are Peter, servant of the servants of God. So, and I'm saying this for a lot of you that don't realize the Vatican is one of the most powerful slave masters on this planet. Okay?
My viewers know that. Go ahead, continue, because there are other people.
And I have had very personal experiences with this, like to the nth degree, which is, a story for another time. You can go on my YouTube and watch some of the stuff we did in 2013. Okay, but yes, we were definitely dealing with some major power. But the Pope's seal says, you are Peter, servant of the servants of God. So guess what happens when the servants of God show up? You have to serve us, right? Servant of the servants of God. Well, I'm a servant to God. I'm here to do the will of God, which is, grow this earth, nurture it, make it for God's children. Isn't that what you're doing, Pope? I mean, you are my servant, right? And we've done some pretty interesting things. And I don't believe in coincidence, but for those that do, there were some very coincidental things that happened. And just as recently as last year. So I don't talk about that in the public either. And it's very important for people to know. And that's why the keys in that emblem are there. Because if you've ever looked at the Vatican symbol, it's got the cross keys of St. Peter, the triple crown, okay? And then it has a tassel or a rope that goes through the keys. It's tied. And if you look in the Sistine Chapel, you can go online, there's a 3D version, and you spin the camera around and look at where that symbol is above the main entry door, okay? There's an oak tree beneath it. Well, an oak is a symbol of ultimate power and authority and, like communist power and authority. So to me, what that says is we're the ones holding the keys until you guys wake up, the servants, right? So those keys are saying, no, now we hold the keys to wisdom and knowledge. And the sword is the word of God. And the apple is the law of God. And the crown is God's crown. And the wheat is God's people, which is why they use it in the UN and in Israel, because they're claiming to be God's people, but they're not. They're phonies. They're Gentiles. They're the fakes. All right. Spiritual Israel. Israel is spiritual. It's not physical. There's no physical Israeli. It's spiritual. And many people are spiritual Israelites and don't even realize it yet, but they will in due time, So yeah, very interesting stuff. I could go on all day. You know that.
I know. This is great. I've been taking notes. So people see my little pen here and my head down. Whenever I go on the show, I can't help it. I take lots of notes. I just eat up information and love to go back and research for myself. So I find that fun. What do I want to say here? Well, I want to make sure that we go back over how people can register for this private event, because there are some things that they need to do that are a little bit different than what they might be accustomed to. And also to make sure we go over where people can find you. I know, for instance, that you're on Instagram as General_Executor and House of Marcus, and you're on YouTube as House of Marcus. But anything else, like just if you could go over, starting with, like I said, the seminar and how to do that, and then just kind of close out with how people can get in touch with you or join all of that. And then make sure after this recording to email me any links that you would like in the description box. So that way people can just click and even if you want to write out like the steps as we discussed them.
Sure.
Perfect.
Okay. So they can go to houseofmarcus, markus.org. If they want to go to the event, they'll just click on news. They'll drop down, it'll say events, click on events. You'll see the one at the top is the main one, August 20th, 21st. You click on that. Now, they won't let you purchase until you sign an NDA. So you just have to go through our process of signing our terms and conditions, because again, that's how we keep it private. And if any agents are coming in, just want them to know they're under an NDA too. So if they use it against us, we're not breaking any laws. You got no right to take our information or anything that we teach and use it against us. So there's an NDA involved. Once you do that, you're pretty much registered. When we have the seminar, you'll come in, we'll sign you in, you'll get a bracelet, whether you paid for the VIP dinner or not, whether you're a member or a non-member. That's just so we can tell who's who. You don't have to become a member. We do have pages open that are open to users on our site, and users are those that signed an NDA. So once you sign NDA, you'll have a little more flexibility on the site, and then the real private stuff, of course, is behind the membership wall. So that's the website. We have, yes, there's general_executor, which is my personal Instagram page. Like you said, House of Marcus on YouTube, if you search that. Instagram, House of Marcus, which we just put up. I'm not a social media guy. So when my team came in, they're like, all right, we got to get you, at least social media. And granted, everybody hates Instagram and all that stuff now, but it's still there. So Facebook, House of Marcus, Instagram, House of Marcus. We're getting our Telegram up and other platforms. We don't have them yet, but we're getting those up. So you can find us there. If you want to contact us, when you go to the website, you'll see in the top right corner, contact, just click it. It'll take you to our member support center. There's a search bar where you can type questions in. We don't have a whole lot of content yet there. So you can go down, scroll down a little further, and you can put in, what you want to contact us about. And then we'll respond. Our team will respond to you. So you can send us a support ticket. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to be a user. You can just go right there and send us a support ticket. So those are the few ways you can get a hold of us at the moment, and we will be expanding. And just to recap, we're about building a new world, a new society. We're not about, just talking about it and, trying to throw things at the wall and see what sticks. So come join the community. That's what we're really about. We need everybody, because that's, to me, the only solution. You got to build new. You can't rely on this old thing that's falling apart.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time you've taken to talk to my audience, and this will also be mirrored on other channels. So if you're watching and you missed this premiere, you can watch it on Dr. Paul Cottrell's channel. I'm not sure exactly when those will air, but you can just stay tuned and subscribe over there. And this will also be available on my Telegram, which is rainbow_food_rocks, where you can find me nowadays if you're missing me and trying to figure out where in the world did Gail go.
Yeah, she's still here.
And also, in closing, I need to also let my viewers know that the reason why I haven't been doing so many YouTube videos is I actually opened up a physical location in Tempe, Arizona. It's the Rainbow Herbal Store within the Sozo Healing House. And I have a holistic healing fair on July 30th from 1 to 3 that all are invited. You can come from out of town if you want. And we'll have 14 other practitioners, I'll be there as well, offering different modalities of healing and naturopathic medicine. We'll have a naturopathic doctor on site. So you can come, ask questions, learn. There'll be some free services, some paid services, little mini sessions. And then, of course, I'll have all my baked goodies because I also do the rainbow home baking. And so I'll have my famous rainbow cookies, and I'll have a whole bunch of different chocolates and the deodorants that I make by hand, the essential oils that I bottle, so on and so forth. So I do invite you to come check that out. But that is why I have not been on YouTube as much. I was setting up the office, and I've been hosting events. And then I'm also networking with people like Robert Michael and trying
who
to
will be at the
something.
event. I'll be at the event too if people want to chat it up.
So you're coming to my event, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to be at his event. He's coming to my event. I'm going to be a vendor at his event, and then he'll talk to you at my event if you have questions.
Privately.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to end this recording and we can chat afterward.
Thank you. I appreciate it. See you,
All right.
everybody.
Ciao.